a couple of we're just checking to make sure that we are live here. Here's Mike. Thanks for checking LinkedIn real quick. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Now I'm seeing if we landed doing it this way. This is just really bizarre, but
Oh,
um,
looks like it.
really,
Yeah.
that's really profound. Uh,
There we go.
so
You're
so
live.
well, that's a good thing, right? And now we're just waiting for Jack. And for those who were just running late because there was an anomaly. Uh, I don't know what else to call it. Um, so we're going to sit here and make sure that we get our Jack, and we're going to probably start over. Ah, here he is.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So we'll
Okay.
start from so we'll start all over again. Hey,
Yes,
hi guys.
I'm going to
It's good
start
to see
over.
you.
We just got to remember Mike has got a skedoodle in
Yeah.
in less than 50 minutes.
Yeah.
So we'll keep that in. You're joining Job Seeker Nation, and we just pop up anywhere on your timeline. We thank you very much for joining us here. Uh, you know Jack, you know me. Mike Bird is in the house with us, joining us on our panel today, as we're going to have a slightly shorter version. How you doing, Mike?
I'm well. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Jack. It's so much fun to be here.
This
Yes,
is like
and
deja vu. I could
Yeah.
swear.
I
You
know,
ever have
right?
a feeling you had this conversation before?
Yeah,
I,
right.
I feel like we just had this. It's crazy.
I
It's
know,
wild.
I know.
Yeah.
We're doing this again. Well, anyway, we're debunking job search myths, so we want you to join us in the chat. Those of us who are just probably passing by and scrolling, yes, we are live, but this is not the original spot. But hopefully, people will catch up in some kind of way, and we can deploy these super fans to let them know that we're over here virtually, then rather over there. Then we'll be okay. So we're debunking job search myths, and we're getting into the first one. We're talking about job search online and their applications. In fact, their applications, they work, they don't work. There are different stats out that say, and they differentiate greatly. One thing we probably do agree is that nobody really knows where the bottom hits when he goes to. We talk about applying online. So that's why very often there's a discrepancy. Do they work? They don't work. Mike, your thoughts on job applications online?
Yeah. So, in another recent life, I think I was saying that job boards can be useful for a job seeker to kind of figure out where the market is headed in their industry, to figure out who is hiring, if they have gotten out into the open market with their roles, and they can be useful to kind of get a sense of what is actually required, so that they can build a resume around some of the things that are in a job description. But I still believe that time is better spent building relationships with people, getting to know hiring managers or getting to know recruiters in that industry, versus trying to go all in on online applications.
Yeah, yeah. Jack?
Yeah. It's. So I look at it's kind of a necessary evil that because you want to deploy everything at your disposal to get a job. So that
Mm-hmm.
I agree with Mike. You want to network, you want to spend a lot of time where you can get the most bang for your buck. But at the same time, to me, it makes sense to kind of peruse the different job sites and go through the laborious task. And what's really just mind numbing, and it's to the point where it's like you don't even want to bring it up because everybody knows it's just so cringy and awful when you have to go and fill out these long forms that ask for all this like information, and it feels like they're collecting your data and they don't care. Like I was just talking to somebody who's telling me about how they're filling it out, going through this application. They're asking all
Mm-hmm.
these personal questions. Then they have to take a test, and then you have to just do this out, this and on and on. And finally, I can't take it anymore. And it's really surprising in today's day and age where we all have short attention spans that companies still do this. It almost is like a warning sign. Like if you're doing all this, you don't get it. You're not with the times, and you're not respecting people's time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like you have to use that as a criteria point. Do I really want to kind of move forward with a company like this that right from the get-go, they're just they're not valuing the time, they're not valuing me, and they're wasting my time, and it's kind of rude. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think in the interim, it's been the same process for the most part since the early 2000s. Not really
Right?
1999, 1998 or so. Career Builder, Monster, and those companies start to pop up, and that was the place to go.
Yeah.
And you didn't, in that was the only way to go online. There wasn't people weren't massively sending resumes like they are today, funny enough. But you would think that there'll be something a little bit more polished and something a little bit more traceable, like a traceable application where you can see where you actually are, even though there are some companies that provide that ideally
Mhm.
only, right? Because they don't know
Mhm.
exactly where you are. They're just saying your resume is here, but sometimes that needle doesn't move forever. So, it's really I just find it interesting that we haven't moved the needle
Yeah.
from a tech point. Mike, you have some thoughts. Is it any different in Canada? You're in Canada, correct?
Yeah, that's right. I wouldn't say it's too different. I mean, applicant tracking software systems are pretty much the same here as they are in the U.S. And
Mm.
I think it really comes down to sort of the individual hiring manager or recruiter if they're going to engage the candidate more directly or more personally in the hiring process. That's kind of their option, their choice. But no, I think it's very similar up here versus in the U.S.
But you think
Yeah.
Canadians are nicer? That you right? Generally speaking, it does seem that
Sometimes.
way. So, maybe when it comes to hockey not, but with other things they seem pretty chill and pretty good. So you would think they would be the ones to make it easier and nicer and more. No? Or do I
I
have a
don't.
misconception about Canadians? I'm giving them too much credit.
I'd like to think the
Yeah.
stereotype is somewhat accurate, but I don't
Yeah.
think we've spread over to
Yeah.
this. This is a great area that I really do hope that
Yeah.
hiring really does address. That people say, you know what, we can make this a little bit more humane and value people's time a little bit more because there's a lot of frustration around there when it comes to the hiring process these days.
Yeah, we have a lot of ear data in the sense that we hear applicants don't hear back from employers, or when they call, they don't have an idea where your application actually is. We can't say it's posted on the fridge, right? So, so you just kind of wonder how why there isn't more answers regarding that. Instead, we're using the old archaic system. But all in all, though, the results kind of end up the same. You've got to wait, or better yet, you better disrupt the system by trying to get a referral and try to get in that way. So that way, at least a person has handed one to a hiring manager, and that the chances go up greatly. As far as we know, of you getting a call back, or at least you knowing that you will get an interview or you won't get an interview. How about you, Jack?
That just makes too much sense. They're not going to do it. That's just too. It's so eventually what's going to happen. I think you know what. I think eventually what's going to happen is you're going to have a place like Microsoft or Apple come up with a really cool streamlined way of doing it, and then everyone's going to copy them. It's got to happen. It's a matter of time until somebody puts it together because number one, it's going to make a lot of money for whoever puts that software together.
Mm-hmm.
So there's because you always say for these startups you want to find a pain point and solve the pain point and come up with something that people want. And clearly, this is an area where people want to make it better, make it flow. Like Mark, what you were saying, like where you are in the whole process, what's the next step, and so on. So I'm hoping, I gotta believe it's gonna happen. And you probably see one of these, big tech companies go first, and like it's happening oftentimes, then everyone else kind of copies them and gets aboard.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just wish I was smart enough to know how. Like, I'm not a tech guy, so I don't know how to really build something like that. But whoever's listening, don't do it because don't jump in front of us. This is our idea. So
Yes.
maybe we'll edit that part out, Mark.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
we don't give it away.
we're on a live stream and all of it's right there
Yeah, because
for
then
the
one day we'll invite a
taking.
guest on. He's going to say, or she's going to say about this new thing they invented. And we're like, son of a. That's we came up with that. Damn it.
Yeah. Well, it's sailing upstream. Really,
Yeah.
when it comes down
Hmm.
to it. I don't know if the frustration is, well, I do know the frustration having, gone through some applications in the early 2000s that people, the thing is that there was a time when you could call and actually get a tangible idea, say, well, we're in this stage right now.
Yeah.
Now it's like, don't you call, don't you fax me, not
How
using
dare
carrier
you,
pigeon.
right? How
I'm not
dare you
using
follow
carrier
up?
pigeon. Is all these threats. It's like, really? I thought you said you were family. But all in all,
Well, you know what? Wait, they are a family, but like how most families are all messed up, right? So I guess it does make sense.
dysfunctional family.
Right, right. So it's a dysfunctional family
Yeah,
that doesn't talk to each other. So
right,
that's kind of what it is. Yeah, we're a
right,
family here. We don't
right.
talk to each other. If we do, we just yell at each other. This
That's right.
company's a big family. Yes.
Right. Well, I think there's, time is, I think time is going to run out to where the job application process as we know it now, it's going to be obsolete at some particular point. We can't keep running in circles forever, or we can't be, like the Who song, we can't be fooled again,
Mhm.
in thinking that that's going to be a very smooth process. I think people are going to get a little bit smarter and figure out, and some people have figured out ways to get around the job application. But unfortunately, most people keep applying and not hearing things, and they get frustrated. So they come to professionals like us, and they are frustrated. They're ready to give up. And then we go from being coaches, consultants, resume writers, etc., to being motivators and comforters. And and you have to play both roles these days, right, Mike?
Yeah, totally right. I actually was speaking with a client of mine just the other day, earlier this week, who said, feeling a bit lost. I have applications out here and I'm not hearing back. And I spoke to this person and a little while ago and just sort of feeling like there's no real human to human connection the way that there might have been once upon a time. And I do think that technology, as it is now, has kind of made it more
Yeah.
inhumane. And hopefully, we can go to a place where we find a better balance of being able to really connect people to each other again and
Mhm.
make it manageable. Because I do appreciate from the hiring manager side of things that sometimes they just get an avalanche of people on their desk through online applications, and that doesn't make things any easier for them.
Yeah. Debris is back with us, Jack. She always joins us almost every week. She says that would be great because as it is now, there's a lot of silent airspace.
Yeah.
Then you get an email that says, we've decided to choose someone else. Now, that's interesting that you should get a rejection because I think that's interesting too, because most people don't even get any feedback whatsoever other than, please be patient. Jack, did you want to wrap up this particular
Yeah. I
topic
think
with a
you know
comment?
what it is, in my opinion. This mirrors what's just going on in society as a whole. With the proliferation of all sorts of social media. Think about it. In social media, it's never, hey, Mike, really good point you made about this political topic. You changed your mind. You changed my mind. Hey,
Mhm.
Mark, yeah, that was really smart thing you said about vaccinations and what happened. It just doesn't happen. It's yelling and arguing and just not listening to the other person's viewpoint. And I contend is that I think what happens, it spills over into other places, just like ghosting started outside of recruiting and relationships where just kind of ghost your partner or whatever, and that it's over. Same thing happens now in this whole space. So to me, it's following along,
Mhm.
and I think the same way in real life and social media life, where it just there's just this awkwardness, this anger, this frustration, which is symptomatic of the times, and then it bleeds over into the companies where people are just like whatever, and it's surprising because like you would think some people say, "Wow, I'm being really rude to people," but then you say,
Mhm.
"Well, the people are rude to me, so F it, I'm going to be rude back." Or
Yeah.
if they don't really say it, they're thinking that. So I I'll say this, I think until somehow, let's just take the U.S. and we'll throw in Canada too, because like you're kind of part of us. We I think we view Canada, right? Right, Mark. I think we could speak
North
for all
America.
Americans.
Yes.
Yeah, like we say, yeah, it's like you're part of us. So I think until we improve our outlook and our mindset and start being, better people and getting along, I think once that change, I'd be curious, and I think it would change also with the whole job search, because
Mhm.
then people would be more sympathetic, more empathetic, more caring.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I don't want to be an idealist, but I'm confident that eventually will happen, because things run in cycles. And eventually I think all this, argument, anger will kind of peter out, and then maybe it'll turn around. And I think that's when really things will go turn for the better.
Yeah, well, hopefully everybody's word will be their word. And
Yeah.
they say they're going to do something, or they
Yeah.
say when you apply, these things
Yeah.
will happen, and it actually
Mhm.
happens.
Yeah.
Instead of say, "Oh, your guess is good as mine," kind of answer, and we're all kind of wondering how that's going to look at the end. But let's go ahead and hit it. We want to try to hit as many of these
Okay.
myths as we possibly can in this hour, or less than an hour. Number two, hiring managers ghost candidates when they're not interested. And I always find that very interesting. And probably the past couple of years, in the past year, we've been talking about that some, Jack, in the
Yeah.
earlier shows. But I think in the last 2 years, we've heard a whole lot more than we had prior to that. Because I think
Mhm.
from 2011, 2019, I didn't hear such a thing going on. So you guys, Mike, some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it definitely can be true, and I don't think it's necessarily malicious or intentional that the hiring manager is doing that. I just think that there's volume overload in a lot of these instances. If they have an easy apply button on their job posting on LinkedIn and
Hmm.
350 people click it in 2 days, then that poor human, and I think that sometimes we forget that there is a human somewhere on the employer's side who has to kind of sift through all of that, and they can't. I mean, they're at their maximum bandwidth, and that leads to people getting
Yeah.
lost and ghosted.
I think
Yeah.
that's absolutely right.
Hmm.
It's like, you know, sometimes we all look at it from our vantage point, and you have to put yourself in their shoes. So if I'm an HR person, internal talent acquisition, and I post a job, let's say I post 3 jobs, and now I have no exaggeration, 300 resumes. It's almost impossible, even though you can have an ATS system to curate it sort of for you and what have you. But still, it's so much time and effort, and then it's almost literally impossible to get back to so many people, and also to get back with them with something meaningful as opposed to just
Mm-hmm.
a canned response. So it just becomes overwhelming, and it was never like that, because you have, as you said, the easy apply, you have all these different job boards, you have all these different job aggregation sites, you have the company with their own job boards. So it's so easy, and everybody walks around with their phone no matter where they are, so it's so easy to send out the resumes, and it's just information overload. So
Yeah.
to be fair to people, even though we could say, hey, they shouldn't, I find myself in that same thing. When you get so many resumes, so many responses, you just don't have enough time
Mm-hmm.
to get back, and you fall into that pattern too. And I admit I'm guilty of that as well, that it happens where I mean to get back and I plan to get back, but then you have 5 other things coming in, and before you know it, time goes by and you're like, oh man, it's yeah, it is a little bit of a dilemma.
Yeah, I just find it interesting too that, I think the first myth that we talked about and this one kind of goes together for some folks who've experienced a long job application. Then maybe they get a little bit of bite, then they get ghosted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then that doubles the frustration.
Yeah.
But I think with the technology being that now there's software that allows the recruiter to text back and forth with the candidate. I forgot the name. I want to say the company's Textio, if I'm not mistaken. Still, people, and I don't. I'm not saying that this is Textio's fault or solely exclusive to them, but that we have more ways to communicate, and yet people still lack the
Yeah.
communication wherewithal to make sure that at least the person is apprised of what's going on within the
Mm-hmm.
process. Mike.
Yeah, you've hit on something that's really big, right? When there has been some degree of communication between an employer and a job seeker, and suddenly the employer kind of goes dark and pulls the plug, most job seekers remember that, and it can be a pretty permanent bit of damage to the reputation of either the individual
Mm-hmm.
talent person or the company as a whole. And it's just, I think that once an employer commits to engaging in some way with in a either over the phone or over Zoom or in some way like that with their candidate, they need to take it seriously. If they are going to let the candidate go, that's great. They should do it in a way that that person doesn't then go ahead and say, you know what, that company really stiffed me when I tried to apply for their job,
Yeah.
because that's a story that spreads quickly.
Yeah, yeah. So it's not so much of we understand if we're talking about being truth and myth that at times that has happened,
Mm-hmm.
but other things have happened in between too to the non-control, like the pandemic happened and put a lot of people, they got caught in the chasm, so to speak, and didn't go anywhere for a long time. What I find interesting is that there are times when, and I think Jack, you and I may have touched on this a little bit, to where people are hearing about jobs 6, 7 months after they applied. I
Yeah.
thought that's a very interesting phenomenon that's been happening lately.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, well, you know, what happened? Any
Well,
insight into that?
yeah, give it to the just take a step back with the others. Like I'll see as a recruiter, I'll get ghosted. This happened like for instance, it happened just recently
Hmm.
for a company I've dealt with. I place people, I know them really well. I consider, the person a friend. You know how you have these virtual online kind of friends, you
Sure,
never
Mm-hmm.
see in person, but
sure.
you have a rapport.
Right.
It's like, dude, we're like I said, Ken, give me some feedback. What's what's going on? And it's bizarre because like,
Yeah.
okay, hey, like, can you please tell me so I can tell this candidate what's happening? So it's not just the candidates who get it. You get from the recruiters who they're asking you to represent them and to find candidates for them, and then you don't even hear back.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing. And then I'm sorry. And then what was that other question we were supposed to
The
be
other part
answering?
was that people are starting to hear back from
Yeah,
applications as long as a
yeah, yeah,
year.
yeah. Well, I think what I'm hearing a lot of that is this. I hear a lot of that in like the hotels, the travel,
Hmm.
the leisure, the restaurants. So in the areas that were hit hardest, and there were so many furloughs and layoffs and downsizing, now they need these people. So they're going back into their archives and saying, "Hey guys, remember us? Hey, you want to come back and work here?" So that does have it. But then I have seen that also in the white collar kind of jobs, even pre-pandemic,
Hmm.
where they'll say, "Hey, we'll keep you on file," and then a lot of times you think, "Yeah, sure, you keep them on file," but it does happen. Like I'll
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you this, like as a recruiter too, they'll come back and say, "Hey, Jack, remember you sent over Mike Bird for this kind of role and it wasn't a right fit? We have something else that opened up. Do you think he's be interested? Can you get in touch with him?" So that does happen. It's not, and I don't want to say it happens routinely, but it happens enough that
It's not
if
routinely. That's
yeah, but it
it is
happens
not
enough
routine.
that if someone tells you that, if someone says that to you, don't immediately write it off as they're just blowing you off, because I've
Mm-hmm.
seen it happen where they will get back to you and will ask. And as Mark said, will it happen all the time? No. But does it happen once in a while? Yeah.
I guess that's what they mean by be patient. We're still working through
Yeah,
applications.
kind of. 4 years later, be patient. 4 years later, huh?
Years later.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
wonder how long that's going to go on.
yeah,
But that's kind of, I don't know, when you hear about it going on in the travel agency, I mean, the travel industry,
yeah.
the hospitality industry, you just kind of wonder that might have been part of the problem all along. And it's just now
Mm-hmm.
coming to the surface. Who knows? We're not in that industry, but all in all, to say is sometimes that the pandemic has exposed a lot of people to the anomalies and bad things, to where you go, oh, so that's why that person's not going back to Chipotle's or they're not going back to that restaurant because this is how they act. And it's kind of, you end up being on the other end, unfortunately. But let's move on to another one, and I think this was one that Mike had. I love this topic. A great resume gets you hired, and Mike, that is your alley there. that used to be mine, but this is your alley for this show. Uh, but really, I think that people are, they wonder, they still get an idea that, because there's an investment into a resume, that means that's also the magic elixir or the
Mm.
magic wand, so to speak. You want to elaborate a little bit?
Yeah, as it's written, just straight sentence like that, it's a myth. A great resume is certainly part of a good candidacy for the vast majority of people, unless you're in a situation where you really know the hiring manager or managers well. I actually started a role really recently, just this spring, where the company I now work at, Rafter, they've actually never seen my resume. So that gives you an idea of the fact that,
Mhm.
yeah, it can be valuable and it can be important if you want to stand out in that crowd of, if you do go down the online application route, to stand out among the 300 people, many of whom didn't really prepare something great for that. But it is not the silver bullet, like you said, Mark. It's part of building trust with an employer and communicating your value, but it doesn't get you the offer all by itself.
Wait
Yeah,
a minute, you just dropped
absolutely.
that very nonchalantly. So congratulations. What happened? You have a new job?
I do have a new job,
Oh,
and to
good
kind
for
of,
you.
yeah, I work in an ed tech startup actually that's really phenomenal. And just, yeah, to go back to a little bit of what you were saying earlier
That's
about
great.
the waiting to hear back for a year. It's not that I was waiting to hear back, but it was a process of building a relationship with someone over about a year and a half that brought everything together. And so I think sometimes job seekers need to remember that great opportunities sometimes just take a little bit of persistence and patience to get.
So good for you. So are you still going to do the career related work on top in addition to your regular?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Oh,
and
cool.
still produce the podcast. I
Well,
still
good for
just
you.
love helping job seekers. That hasn't changed.
That's excellent. Excellent. Congratulations.
Thanks,
So
appreciate that,
so
Jack.
so so you went through it yourself. So you got did you run into a lot of these same issues that you would coach people on?
Sometimes, yeah, and I mean, this
Yeah.
is a pretty small company, and so a lot of the big HES systems that are in place in larger, more established companies, that wasn't really part of the plan, part of the
Mhm,
picture in my
mhm.
case. But it was really good. It was a really human driven hiring process. So it is proof, a little bit of anecdotal
Yeah.
proof that some people are still doing it in that way.
Yeah.
So exciting to see.
That's
And
great.
should be excited about doing it that way, because
Yeah.
Yeah.
the more human a company is, the more it benefits everyone, and you're not
Mhm.
tied to a process which you can't. You're answering, you're guessing,
Mhm.
and that's your answer, and people have to buy into that guess or that answer. But all I have to say that, having a resume, I know that, Jack, in your business, is
Mhm.
pretty straightforward. Someone gives you a resume, good, bad, or different. If somebody is well qualified, they're
Yeah. Yeah.
likely to see someone.
Right, right. Because if you have, a resume, you want it to look nice. You want it to look, you don't want to have typos and things of that nature. But it really boils down to, hey, what skills do you have? So let's say for this particular job, you need to have these 5, 6 core skills. And if you look down the resume, it's like check, 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 check. Then it's like, yeah, perfect. That's great.
Hmm.
And you may have the best looking resume with the best fonts, most up to date current styles and all that. But if you don't really have the substance, it's not going to push you over. It's
Mhm.
it, it's just not going to help. So I think you need a combination. Yeah, you absolutely want to have a tight resume that looks good, that's readable, that's legible, that because you could also have the skills, but you don't clearly describe it. And that happens a lot too. So you scratch your head and like, I think this guy does it, but I'm not really sure. So it's really important that you put down everything in a way that people could get and go, okay, yes, this is what this person does. Boom, I want to do it. But looks and feel alone, it's not going to win the day.
No, not at all.
Yeah,
And in fact,
yeah.
I've, in my past, having been the role of a hiring manager, I've had people hire people who had spelling errors and grammar errors on their resume, as funny as it sounds. And, we hear the catcall all the time that you shouldn't have those errors on it. But truth be told, if you have the relationships disrupt
Mhm.
the resume application process, so to speak, as we know it, as we've been talking about. It gets really weird too, as I began to look at my picture and see still pictures running through. This weather is really killing us here, but I think one of the things that people are kind of stuck is that they often spend so much time working on their resume. Again, the idea, the false, the perception that the resume is the end all be all, and truly isn't. That people spend more time and kind of miss out on what's more important, like trying to find the heartbeat to the industry that you're applying to and
Mhm.
how that actually works is far better than spending all that time trying to create a great resume, right, Mike?
Yeah, you can get sucked into wanting to get every sentence and bullet point to be just perfectly neat and tidy. And at the end of the day, when you got to ship it, you got to ship it. And it's more important to have places that are great places for you to ship to, people to put it in the hands of, than to just be losing all your time trying to make it, as Jack said, really, really pretty.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Jack, any more thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that's it. You got to really have a combination of that. You could really clearly, concisely set forth what you do, what your responsibilities are, what brings you to the table, why they're relevant for this job at hand, and then you have to have the goods to back it up. So that's key. That's the most you want to focus. You want to focus and make sure you have everything on there. So whoever reads it says, "Yes, this is who we need. You're the right person. Now let's really talk."
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Job myth number three, or truth or myth: if a job seeker doesn't brag about themselves, no one else will. And I find this very interesting because I think we see two extremes: people who don't say much at all, and then there are people who are incessant and probably obsessive about what they do and how well they do it, and sometimes both of those miss the point of the target audience. Jack, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you absolutely have to be your own best salesperson without a doubt. And it sounds cold, but yeah, very few people can advocate for you. Could you try to find people at the company to say a good word for you? Sure. Can you try to find folks who could put in a reference? Yes. But when it really boils down to it, you have to be the person who could sell and champion yourself. And
Mhm.
it's not easy because a lot of people, give you an example, the people I recruit for compliance, they're not marketers, they're not salespeople. They're more cerebral, they're more focused on kind of audit-ish, let's say, type of behaviors, which doesn't lend itself to be a glad hander, a schmoozer, a self-aggrandizer. And sometimes people feel very uncomfortable with that. They feel like if I'm selling myself, there's something slimy about it, there's something used car-ish about it. But so I would suggest to people, you have to get over that because that is a hurdle because you have to be the one who is bragging. But bragging is comes as a distasteful word, but it's really you're able to articulate why you're good at something, what your skills are, what advantages you bring to the table, and
Mhm.
really make people. And you have to also do it in a dynamic way, where you
Yeah.
can't just have this monotone. Hey, I do this and I do that and I do something else. You have to be like, all right, here's what I do. I do this and I do that and I do. Oh my God, I'd be perfect because I've done such and such. And you want to draw them in so they feel, wow, this person is so passionate about what they do, and this person is going to be a bullet, but a bundle of fire coming over here. Let's give this person a shot. So it's a
Mhm.
combination of you really have to sell yourself, market yourself, make people know you exist, sell yourself, pitch yourself. Yeah. And that's part of it. That's part of the deal.
Mhm. Absolutely. Mike?
Yeah, I agree with everything Jack just said. And in addition to that, I would say that sometimes we get a job seeker can get caught up on what is fantastic about them, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's really about connecting the dots to the employer and saying, how
Mhm.
can I serve you in what you need from this role, and selling into that problem or that need that they have. And I think when job seekers are really good at knowing themselves and knowing how that they can meet those employer needs, that's when the bragging, if we say it that way, it starts to feel less like bragging. Now we are problem solving for that employer, and that's when we become a really compelling candidate.
Yeah. I use the term beat the prescription to the employer's job description.
Mm.
And that simply says you have to show how you can solve that problem in so many words. But I think too that job seekers need to also find people that agree with them about how great they are, because that really 10 times your value once you've established with someone else and that person agrees with you, or even at times gets ahead of you and says, yes, I'm excited about this person because they solved these problems and they were
Hmm.
able to solve these problems. And to have that validation means a whole lot. But I think the challenge is, how do you get that into the hiring manager's eye, which is why LinkedIn is so great. You could provide that through recommendations and through testimonies to other, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be there. Are there emails? Are there is there press even validating what you've done? Even if your name isn't particularly mentioned, you can say what role you played a part, and we got
Hmm.
this press together collectively as a team. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it, but I do think you have to spend that time as a job seeker now to be sure that, because people also had to provide references for you, and they also had to provide relevant references, not from 10 years ago when you didn't have those skills. You got to get this to somebody who can speak to the skills that you're offering up now, and say that you have been productive and that you provide solutions with those skills. I know that was a little lengthy, but I think those two things are pretty important to have these days in tow, because other people speaking about you 10 times your value. Jack?
Hmm.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's I, and that's something where I think people have to practice a whole lot because
Mhm.
I come across so many people who have so much trouble articulating who they are, what they're about. They
Mhm.
don't have an elevator pitch. They feel uncomfortable. They can't really state, "Hey, I do one, two, three, and four." So this is something. If you're, some people are natural at it and they're super comfortable and they could just do it on cue.
Hmm.
Others, most others can't. So what I would suggest to people, you really want to spend a lot of time and energy figuring out, okay, what are the responsibilities? What do you have? And then, as Mark and Mike were saying, what are the pain points at the company? So you want to then tailor it. You don't want to just say, here's the list of things. You want to kind of tailor it so then they feel, yes, that's what we need. Yes. We're hurting in this area. Yes, we need help. This is where we're having problems. And you did that before. Oh yeah, I did it in my past job, and here's what I did, and here's how we overcame these issues. And then they're like, oh,
Mhm.
thank you, this is perfect. So it's a combination of the two. Because if you're just bragging what you do, they really don't need that help. They can be
Hmm.
like, meh,
Hmm.
okay, all
Yeah.
right, good for you. But you want to make sure how you can show, hey, I do all this, but this is how it can help you and can make your life easier. Because at the end of the day, too, when someone's hiring, they just want someone to make their life easier.
Yeah.
They just want someone to help them
Hmm.
out, you
Yep.
know, to say, oh, I got someone on my side. They could be my go to person. I don't have to worry. It's all on my plate. Wow, that's great. So that's kind of the goal you want. And then you can watch the body language of the person that you're interviewing with, and you start feeling that you're resonating. Then you double down on it. When you kind of see their
Hmm.
body language, their eye movements, and their that you say, okay, yes, this is important to them. Then you kind of keep feeding into it.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great point. In fact, Prasanti, she says she's been missing the chats and convos, been busy at her new job.
Oh,
It's been a
well,
couple of months since
congratulations.
we've seen Prasanti. Prasanti's in South Africa, Mike,
Oh,
and
wow.
one of her challenges actually is very related to this discussion that we're having now, because she used to have a problem. She said that what happens if you brag too much? Which is a very rare thing to happen. I'm glad, Prasanti, that worked out for you. Yeah, too, there are people who can be egregious with the compliments about themselves. But one of the things is that you want things to be fact based whenever you do talk about yourself, and talk about that you can prove what you've said about yourself. When somebody else says it, that is automatically set in stone, I think, in the sense that people then say, oh, they're talking about you.
Hmm.
And you know what? They weren't even in the same room together, which makes it even more impressive and more authentic. And that's why I say, job seekers need to spend a little bit more time and to think about, okay, who really likes what I do, and how can I get that in front for the world to see, and perhaps the next employer to see. Let's move on to this topic again, talking about recruiters. Here's one we've talked about this show, but I think it's good to bring up again. Careers work for you, the job seeker, and I'm going to say flatly no. It doesn't. It doesn't work that way, and I'm going to let Jack
Yeah.
pontificate a little further on that. But I think that needs to be said again. Go
Mhm.
ahead, Jack.
It's interesting because whether you're a recruiter like myself who works at an executive search firm, or you
Uh-huh.
work in talent acquisition at a company, the key is what I think personally, it's more of being a matchmaker. So you need both sides to put them together. So in a way, for outside recruiter, does the company pays the bills? Yes. For internal talent acquisition, does the company pay the talent acquisitions bills? Yes. Or they pay the salary rather.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, that's on the outside, but a lot of things in life is just, hey, how does it work? So the way it works is that you really have to put them together. So if Mark is looking for a job and Mike is hiring, I have to make both parties happy. I have to have both parties like each other. You want to make sure that each one is going to contribute something and each one's going to benefit from something, so that even though whoever is, the client company that's paying, the placement fee, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you're doing to place them there, but if you don't have that candidate, it's just not going to work.
Right.
So and there's a lot of people who would talk, cast aspersions on, hey, yeah, the recruiter is just working for the company, they don't care about you. Um, I it, could that be? Yeah, but to make it work and to build a career and do it for so many years,
Mm-hmm.
you really have to be able to make both sides happy.
Mhm.
Because if you can't make both sides happy, it's just not going to work. Because you could be a salesperson to sell a car or a piece of furniture, and the car furniture can't say to you, "Oh, I'm going to stay in the showroom. I don't want to go home with you." But a person could do anything. You know what I mean? They could say, "No,
Right.
I changed my mind at the last minute. My spouse doesn't want me to take the job," and so on. So yeah, you have to. You have to really work, and you can't make someone take a job. So
Right.
Mhm.
I could push, cajole, pressure, twist arms, but at the end of the day, they're not going to show up to work. So you have to balance everybody's perspective. And I think what happens, there are a lot of recruiters out there that don't do that. A lot of recruiters, it's kind of a churn and burn mentality, see if they could push someone into it. So that's where you get that bad reputation for an industry, because there's no nuance. They're just
Mhm.
trying to push you and push you and push you to
Mm-hmm.
get it. And you're like, no, leave me alone. And that's what stands out in someone's mind. But I think it's just in my own personal experience for what I've done, but then what I've seen people who've been doing this for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, that's the attributes they have. They realize, hey, if I can't make everyone happy and I can't create a win-win for all involved, it's not going to work for anybody. And I'm going to just spin my wheels and take all that time, and I'm not going to get paid for it.
Right.
Does
Mike.
that make sense? Does that?
Mike.
Yeah, it makes total
Okay.
sense. And excuse me, Jack, I love your analogy of the matchmaker because
Yeah.
it really is about bringing all sides
Yeah.
together. And yeah, of course, flatly speaking, like you said, Mark, no, recruiters aren't working for job seekers, but they are very much aligned with what a job seeker is pursuing. But it's got to be, as you said, Jack, there's got to be a fit. There's got
Yeah.
to be some kind of sustainability because as you know, right, in the contingency game, if the client sees the candidate jump ship after a few months, there's a good chance that you're not going to get fully paid out. And so it's really on everyone to ensure that the fit is really, really strong because no one wants to see that happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think being that we're coming close to the end of the show, we have 5 minutes left. I did want to
Okay.
get, I was thinking, should we go on with another question? I think what we'll do is we'll have to continue this discussion somewhere down the line because this was really
Hmm.
good. And I think we helped a lot, especially with everything that we had. We kind of hit the nail. Uh, yeah, we won't go on there. So Mike, what you got coming up next? What we should look forward to is seeing from you?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for asking. I mean, the Career Builders podcast is approaching episode 100. That will come
Nice.
Wow,
out in
Wow.
nice!
the fall.
Congratulations.
Thanks. We're really excited about that. Lisa has been away on podcast maternity leave this summer, so she will come back just in time for that. And we'll be continuing to produce. Jack's been on the show. Mark, I'd love to get you on the show in the fall. There's no question about that. But that's really what I'm kind of concentrating on while continuing to build up at Rafter and just finding time for job seekers as we go.
Good deal. Jack, you got anything coming up on Forbes that we need to know about?
So today I wrote about that Google is maybe cutting salaries if they want to stay remote, which is interesting. And this is one of the kind of interesting things is keeps evolving, where it looks like a hybrid, then a remote, then we're going to go back to the office, but we have the Delta variant, so we're going to kick it back some more. Kind of this is a message. I don't know how to interpret it from Google. Is this going to be now all these other companies say, hey, you can work remote, but we're going to cut it. So the news is just happening so fast and furious, and there's so much going on. So in this space, it's pretty exciting because it's like it doesn't feel like anything is permanent right now. It seems like things are up in flux, which is a little scary, but a little fun and because you feel like, at least for me, it's like almost anything is possible. You know what I mean? Like this is kind of a time period that if you're cool with uncertainty, you can make things happen. You can try different things and it could work and not work. So that's, I'm trying to write a whole lot of things about just keeping it to advise people where things are going, what's happening, what they should be looking for, how it could help their career, how can it make a difference, what they should watch out for. So there's a lot of interesting developments.
Yeah, there are, and it's a pretty exciting time for us. Even bad news is good for us to have something
because you could talk, like you have these things to explore, right?
Yeah, and explore it like we do every week, which is
because I know you wanted to wrap it up, but then think of the other side too, because bad news could be good news. Because if Google says, hey, you know what, if you are working in New York but you live in Connecticut and we're going to cut because you're there, remotely, we're going to cut you. Well, then another company is going to say, we'll change our policy to lure that person in and say, hey, all right, we won't cut you. We're going to give you the same. So then the person might say, you know what? I'd rather go to that other company. So yeah, one door opens, one door closes, another door opens up. So that's what's kind of interesting about how these things will play out.
Or sometimes they all being copycat and
then
they'll
that's
all
tough.
go with the same policy is. And we've heard from Facebook, I think was the first one to say that we're good. Microsoft has been very quiet, though. And please know that Microsoft has been holding back. In fact, they were the first one that says, no, we're going remote for a while. And everybody just started jumping on that bandwagon. I like to see how they're going to handle the
speaking of, you raised something really interesting, too. There's something maybe we could talk about in the future where you have these collusionary things where people either have these non-compete agreements or no poaching agreements. So that does inhibit it where so you have a good point. If all the companies are saying, okay, we're going to cut everybody who works remote, that's kind of unfair, because then you can't go. And that's kind of restrictive.
It's called class action suit.
You know what? Yeah. Seriously, that might happen. Absolutely.
We can see that happen in the future. We probably want to get going because Mike has got to go. Bye-bye. But I'll just
now he has a job. He got to go. He's like, I don't have time for you guys. I got this cool ed tech
silly hard stops.
Earn a living, right?
Yeah, that I get stock options and stuff. I can't waste my time with you losers. I got to get the hell out of here. I got to go.
In the meantime, thank you all very much for joining Job Seeker Nation. We'll be back next Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Join me on Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern, for the Modern Job Search Checklist, where we're going to be going at it again. And thank you very much for joining us. We'll let you guys go. Have a great week.
It was good seeing you guys.
Good luck. Nice